I'd like to add my voice to Representative Lawlor's, and I know I speak for a number of other legislators who, because we did this quickly, weren't able to be here, but over the weekend I can assure you there was a lot of talk among all of us about this incident and the meaning of it. And I think besides the fact that I am also a lawyer and I've been well schooled in the freedom of speech and the First Amendment and the kind of protected political speech that we're talking about here, and also the existence of this regional intelligence center that apparently was the source of what's been described as a list. Now, we don't know that there's some sort of permanent list that people are on, but it certainly raises questions and concerns among many of us about how exactly intelligence is being handled in this state currently. And I know I was not aware of this segment or department within the Homeland Security Office, not to say that I'm aware of every single thing, but as Chair of Appropriations, I have deep concerns about what we're doing in the departments of this, the executive branch agencies. And I would just read you a description of what the CTIC is. It is said to be, and this is from the website, a regional intelligence center that works with local and state entities, bordering agencies, and federal agencies. In practice, it functions as a clearinghouse to ensure that all criminal and terror-related information is gathered, analyzed, and shared efficiently with law enforcement and Homeland Security entities and officials. That's fine, but I would question, a lot of questions emerge from this. The first one is, if there is a list that's being kept, in what way was this incident related at all to either criminal or terrorist-related issues? The person in question was not arrested for any of these reasons. It had to do with a seeming breach of the peace, and potentially, apparently, the local police had been briefed ahead of time, given some sort of list of potential threatening people, and given pictures of these people, which is why they were able to identify him, where he acted, as we are told from other witnesses, very similarly to other people who were at the same site. There was another woman reportedly who jumped out and shook the governor's hand. So there were other things like this going on. And so it seems to me that it raises questions about what happens when you do have a list of this sort, and the kinds of abuses that are just fraught within that kind of a listing of people who are perceived as threats. How do you get on this list? What are the standards? How are they deciding, and who is deciding, and who's in charge of this agency? And I think these questions need to be answered. They need to be answered publicly. And I understand that the governor has sent out a letter to the commissioner, to Commissioner Boyle, asking the same kinds of questions, that if there is some sort of list that's being kept by a state agency, that she would like to know more about it. Well, so would we. And I think it demands an answer. I think, as Representative Lawlor said, this kind of activity is not appropriate in the state of Connecticut. I think it demands the strongest possible response from all of us. And I hope it is an isolated incident and that we can make sure that we're all sort of on the same page as we move forward. And if anyone else would like to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Caruso, Chair of the GAE Committee, House Chair of the GAE Committee. I wholeheartedly, and I underscore wholeheartedly, endorse the comments of Representative Lawlor and Denise Merrill. I was unaware when I read the paper about this incident, as probably many people across this state, that we had a secret police force in existence. And that's what troubles me here. What happened to Ken could happen to any of us, whether we be an elected official, a journalist, or a political activist. Need to remind everyone that we were found as a country on revolution. Controversy, protest is what our founders envisioned in the Constitution. They gave for that the ability, the flexibility of that document in order for people to exercise their rights, their civil rights. And in this particular case, I see the trampling on of the Constitution of basic rights that people should have. It was an overreaction at worst, and at best, it's just a clear slap at the Constitution. And it's important that all of us speak out loudly about this issue, demand change, and demand that if there is a list available, that be stopped, that we found out how that list came together, who compiled the list, who gave instruction for that list to even take place. And I believe, as a legislature, longtime believer, that oversight is definitely needed. And this is another example where oversight is definitely needed in this particular case. but it's something we have to stand up for. Political activism is not a crime. It should be embraced. It should be encouraged, as long as there isn't violence involved or a violent threat to someone. But it should be embraced. It should be encouraged. That's what makes government work and work well. And what the gentleman did that day, Ken, in that situation, was nothing wrong other than the fact that someone saw him on a list and decided to react the way they did. That cannot be tolerated, as Representative Lawlor said. And so I lend my voice today with other legislators to work to stamp that out, to stop that from taking place. Thank you.
Got any questions?
Just for clarity, you said I wasn't aware we had a secret police force. Who are you referring to? The Hartford Police, the State Police, Homeland Security, all of them, or?
Could be a little bit of all three. You know, the State Police were involved, the Hartford Police were involved. All of a sudden we hear about this list existing about Ken's picture apparently was identifiable to the arresting officer, and that's why they took the action they did. That to me reeks of secret police, something taking place where there's this list going around, information flying, and then a person's detained for the gubernatorial ball, the period of the gubernatorial ball. Yet when they arrested him, there was no visible signs of anything that he had on him that would be a threat to the governor or any public official.
Is there, Mike, maybe you can address this. Shouldn't the state police and local police be compiling lists of people that could pose a threat to public officials?
Yeah, of course they do. But the point with Ken Krajewski in particular is there's nothing about his history that indicates he's, if by threat you mean physical threat, there's nothing in his history that indicates that he would pose a physical threat to any public official or anybody else for that matter. If you're looking at people who might create a disturbance at a public event, that's a different issue. But I mean, you do have a constitutional right to do that type of thing. And the point was, it's not just that I mean, I understand, I mean, taking the public officials at their word, apparently this was the end result of a briefing involving the FBI, the Connecticut State Police, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Hartford Police. And a number of photos, and this is right out of their police report, there was a number of photos of people who, I'll find their words, briefed us on possible threats to Governor Rel by political activists. It says it in the singular, but the context indicates it should be the plural, to include photographs of the individuals. Okay, we're talking about threats to the governor. I'm not aware that Mr. Krajewski has ever made any type of threat against anybody. And the two specific, I mean, the police tell you the specific things they're referring to, and I read you one of those, and I don't think there's any way you can interpret that as being a threat other than a threat to hold a demonstration, which you have a constitutional right to do. So that's one thing. The police approaching him is one thing, and it was a Hartford police officer and a state police trooper based on the police report. Apparently, they were both not they're not wearing full uniforms. They were wearing like a jumper outfit like you would wear in like a special tactics type operation. Apparently, I don't know that that's the case, but apparently that's the case. And then beyond that, they arrest him, take him in, and it's one thing to do what they call a Terry stop, which is momentarily stop the guy, ask him what he's up to, maybe pat him down, ensure he doesn't have a weapon. Maybe that would have been justified under the circumstances. But they didn't do that. They put the handcuffs on immediately, which is an arrest, and they brought him to the lockup. They posted a $75,000 bond for a misdemeanor for someone who's never been convicted of a crime. Based on what? So.
Will your committee or Denise's committee or Chris's committee, are there going to be hearings? Are you going to bring people before you to get these answers? Because you, as we all know, you have a legislative subpoena.
Right.
And you can, well, bring almost anybody, it seems, before you at this point. So are there any hearings going to be planned?
I think there's going to be hearings. Which committees will do it remains to be seen. I've spoken to my co-chair, Andrew McDonald, who said that he's fully supportive of a complete investigation, what format that has to take. I doubt you'd need to use a subpoena because virtually everyone we're talking about is a state official, and apart from Justice Sullivan, I don't know that anyone's refused to come over and testify before the legislature when there was a legitimate question. I've spoken to many of the state officials involved, the Commissioner of Public Safety, the Chief State's Attorney, the State's Attorney for Hartford, and others, and they indicated that they understood what the concern was here, and they all undertook to do a full investigation. The governor herself asked for such a thing. So I'm sure we'll get all the answers one way or the other.